Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up and chatting through everything that I got up to and the books that I read in the month of June. Oh, so June, where did it go? Where did June just disappear to? Like it felt like I blinked and June was gone. So I had some nice weekends. I had my cousin visiting at the very beginning of the month, went to see my grandma, we did some nice bits around London, went to Kew Gardens, which was lovely. I had my mum and stepdad's wedding last weekend, which was lovely. It was so nice being with family and seeing like their happiness and love for each other. And yeah, and now here we are at the end of June and the time has disappeared and gone by. So in the month of June I read 6 books in totality. I did also have one DNF and I am midway through, not quite midway, but I have started another book. So there is progress outside just these 6 and that comes to 3,053 pages. So relatively happy. And it's actually one of my better reading months of the year. I feel as though that used to be like a pretty standard number for me, but this year I've been a little bit slower, so that is actually one of my better months. And you know, I need to remind myself that's still over 100 pages a day. Of the genres, that's 2 fantasy, 1 fantasy romance, 1 like historical magical realism, and then 2 romances. All of the books were adult, and then I had 1 5-star, 2 4.5 stars, 2 4 stars and 1 3.5 stars. So overall a really positive reading month. I enjoyed pretty much everything that I read. Like, yeah, I enjoyed everything I read. I enjoyed everything I read. So really positive apart from the 1 DNF. There is 1 DNF in there which I was just like, nah, not bothering with this one after about 100 pages. And then for my series I started 2 series which puts my on the go at 27 I believe. So I am creeping up a little bit. So still in the mid-20s, but it is creeping up because I am starting incomplete series. I've been starting some incomplete series and I've not been following my rules of reading completed series because I've just been listening to things that have been calling to me, but the ratings have been high, so maybe it's fine. Maybe it's all fine. Anyway, I figured today when I'm talking about the books, we will just start from worst to best and we'll just work our way towards positivity, because it's always best to end on a high. So let's just work our way up to it. Let's just get better and better. So the book that I DNF'd was A Promise of Fire by Amanda Boucher. This was in like the middle of the month. I didn't really know what I wanted to read and I picked this up and it was easy to read. I got about 100 pages in, but I did not care. This is a fantasy romance. We're following Kat, who is a performer in the circus, and in this world there are like different like types of people. In the icy north there is like a glacial queen that rules over the land. There is rebellion stirring in the south and these southern warlords that are rising up and trying to take control, and Kat has ended up in the middle of things and she comes into contact with this warlord and he's like, I can see you've got like extra magical powers, so I think you need to stick with me. But yeah, and it says, faced with dragons, rival gods and traitors longings for her own heart she must decide, is it time to claim her destiny and fight? And the thing is with this, is page 1, they meet. Page 1, she's like, he's striking in a dark magnetic way, his size, weapons and bearing all telling me he's a tribal warlord. I was like, how is it, page 1, you are already admiring, infatuated with him, and then he like goes and kidnaps her and she's still like, he's so attractive, he's just so attractive. And I was just like, God, come on. So it didn't feel like there was much like tension. I was going, I'm 100 pages in and the tension is not tensioning because there was no tension on page 1. So I would have preferred if there was more of a build-up in the romance. As such, it just wasn't really holding my attention because the angst wasn't there. I wasn't like rooting for these characters to get together. And there is definitely like a level of intrigue with the world and like Kat's heritage and where she comes from and the different magics. And I did find the sort of Greek-inspired magic system slightly weird fit with the parts of the world building. But anyway, I was just like, this is shaping up to be very, very fine. It's just very, very fine. So I put it down and was like, I think we're done. I had owned this book for quite a while and so it is one off the TBR. It is a shame because I did have hopes that I was going to enjoy this series, but it wasn't to be. So moving along from it. I will add it to my unhaul. Yeah, and then everything else is pretty positive because the lowest rating is 3.5 stars. So everything else is positive. The 3.5 was for Flawless by Elsie Silver, which is a contemporary romance which I listened to, and I think for me that's a fine rating for a contemporary romance. Like, I enjoyed it, I had a lot of fun with it, but I don't think it was necessarily the most memorable, and I wasn't like swooning completely over it, but I had a fun time with it, and I would read other books by Elsie Silver, so it's not like that was just very average. I found it was like, it was a fun time whilst I read. I had fun with it. I think it was well done. It is set in Canada, which I do love that setting because I love Canada. We're following our male character is a bull rider, and he has been doing that for many years, but he's now getting older, like into his 30s, and is considered old for that sport, and he's now getting injured and he needs to probably retire, and he has made a bit of a flaw by disturbing the media and like criticizing or saying that he doesn't like milk, and milk farmers are in uproar, and he's losing all his sponsorships. The drama. His manager has a daughter who he has now said you can take the reins on managing him and his brand, and so they are like getting to know each other, the back and forth, and obviously there is going to be a romance going on between the two of them, and I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I think that there was a good dynamic between the two of them. I enjoyed the setting. I had fun. I think it was well paced, so it was just a fun listen. It was a fun listen, but it wasn't like my favourite. But I do think there is like a chance that the other books by Elsie Silver could become like more favourites than that one. I just found like it was a good starting point for getting into her work. Next, but hardly least, I read The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This one was towards the beginning of the month. This is a fantasy historical story, and I think there were like peaks and troughs within this story. There were moments where I was like, I'm really loving this. This is so good. And then there were moments where I was like, oh, I'm not really sure if this is quite like the best fit for this story. So it really went in waves with this. I think I settled on like a 4-star for it. Because the good definitely outweighed the bad. But we're following a main character, Lucia, who is a maidservant within this household, but it's not exactly a rich household, that they have been quite poor, and her employers, they aren't really like revered in society, that they don't really host, the wife would want to have more of a presence and would want to be sort of seen and looked at court, but they're not currently. And Lucia has magic. She's able to do these things she calls little miracles. So if the bread gets burnt, she can make it so that it was just cooked to perfection. And one day her female employer finds out and says, you need to reveal this, you need to do it at one of our dinner parties, fix a shattered cup, which then everybody wants to attend these dinner parties and see these little magics, and that attracts the eyes of some very wealthy and influential people in this world. And this is set in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. There is a religious aspect to it where it's looking at Christianity and Judaism and different religions in this time, and how that they were looked down upon if you didn't fit into the Catholic mold. I think that it tries to cover quite a lot. I enjoyed our characters, I enjoyed our setting, I enjoyed the magic, but there is a whole like plot in this with like a trial based thing, and in some ways I feel as though the trials just weren't necessary. That the plot, I feel, actually detracted from the strength of the book. That I was enjoying reading about our characters, I was enjoying the setting and the magic, but actually the plot let this down, and maybe she should have just focused on this being more of like a character book, or having a slightly different plot within there. I don't quite know, or maybe it's that this is a standalone and that actually it could have worked better if it had been, I don't know, just slightly different. It's like maybe there was too much trying to be like crammed into here with this, like the discovery of the magics, the sort of training, the trials, the after trial. Like maybe there was too much trying to be crammed into this book that it didn't quite all fit. But as I said, I did like the writing, I did like our characters, I did like the setting, the magic, and I would definitely want to read more set in this time period, and seeing that setting I really enjoyed, but there was just something missing, something not quite right, that would stop it getting like a high rating from me. I would also think I've liked to have seen a little bit more development in the romantic elements in this, that they felt a little abrupt. And actually I feel like I'm being very critical right now. Some of the like side characters, the personalities of them, like it's as though they just changed instantly. There was one moment where you were like, I don't know if I really like you. You're a bit like not my cup of tea. And then suddenly they were being really nice and I was like, what has happened? You've had a complete personality shift. And there was no build up to this personality shift. A few gripes, but overall I had a fun time. I did have fun with it, I did have fun, but a few mixed opinions in there. Next I have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This one I actually finished last night, so very, very recently, so very fresh in my mind. And again, I really enjoyed this one. I think it was like a 4 stars, but I didn't love it as much as some of her other books, which I'm sad about, because particularly Part of Your World, I loved a part of Your World. That book is like a standout book by Abby Jimenez for me, and although I did enjoy this, it just didn't have that same magic. So in this one we're following 2 characters, Justin and Emma. Emma is a travel nurse and she has actually had quite a traumatic childhood, and that is something that I do like about this, is that there is a extract in the beginning which lists like trigger warnings and some of the content within the book. I skipped it, but it is there for if anyone wants to see that. But yeah, Emma has had quite a traumatic childhood, which is definitely feeding into her current life. And her best friend are travel nurses, so they go around and they do X amount of time in each location. And then Justin is an engineer and he will be at the beginning of the book taking over the like parenting of his younger siblings. So they both have got quite a bit of baggage, but the story starts where Justin posts like that everyone he dates then goes on to find their significant other following dating him, to which Emma responds saying, oh, me too, everyone I date does that as well. And so they said, oh well, if we date each other that will counterbalance and we will be able to like move on to find our soulmates. But obviously these two are going to end up very happy together because that's what it is. I did enjoy the setting. It's in Minnesota, which I have not been to, but I think that's where Abby Jimenez lives, and I'd say she describes it really well. She makes it quite compelling to go there and see it, see the lakes, see the nature. So I did enjoy these characters. I do think this had maybe a bit too much of a real world like contemporary thing to it, that it is a romance, but there is a lot of like life in there and struggles and hardships that people can go through, as opposed to the romance. And the romance is definitely there. The romance is definitely there, and I did enjoy the romance and I did enjoy the friendship and other relationships that we got in here, but it maybe there was too much hard-hitting stuff. Like both our characters were having a hard time of things outside of the relationship. Maybe it would have been better if there was like only one of those like harder hitting things in here, but it was fun. I did enjoy it, and I do really like this cover. I think this is my favorite one of the covers that she's had recently, and I do enjoy like seeing the cameos from previous characters from Abby Jimenez books. I do find that quite like Easter egg hunting. I like that. I also read The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. You see, I did do quite well at reading some of my like new releases this month. Look at all these new releases that I read, all these books that I have now read. So this is Catherine Arden's latest release. It is a World War I historical fiction with a sort of fantastical magical realism type twist in it. In this we've got 2 timelines. We are following our main character Laura, who is a war nurse, and she's been nursing on the front line for quite a while, but at the beginning of the book she has actually been sent back to Canada, where she has come from following a injury where she was working, had been bombed, and she had been impacted by that, and so she had been discharged, sent home, but she knows that her brother is still on the front line and she doesn't know what's happened to him, and so she's got these concerns going through her head of, where is my brother? I've not heard from him. Is he alive? Is he dead? Where is he? As I've had no news. There had also been an incident back at home, so she's lost all her family, and so she's in this sort of limbo of, I know I'm injured but I can't just do nothing. And then we're also following her brother a few months prior to that on the front line, and the events that he's going through, the people that he's meeting in these events. Then as Laura is going back to France to investigate and to try and find her brother, it's sort of seeing those timelines interweave together, and this does have a sort of magical twist to it that's thread throughout it. I found this a very emotive book. I think it was really well written, that I think you can see how well crafted I'd say it is. It felt as though like every word was there for a purpose, and I was like, I feel as though I can tell how well thought out this book is, like how well chosen each word, how like well edited and crafted this whole book is. And maybe that's because Catherine Arden is quite an established writer now, that she has been writing for many years, and I think she said that this has taken her a long time to write, and I would say it is quite an emotive book. I don't believe I actually cried reading it, but it's a war book. They're not exactly cheery, so it definitely had some emotive moments in it, and seeing the trauma that these characters were going through. I think the setting was done very well. Like, it was really sort of, you could feel that setting, and you could feel like the traumas that our characters were being put through. I'd say I enjoyed the twists and turns of when this got to and where it all headed. I liked the magical element and that sort of not fully fantastical twist to it, but that out of the norm magical-esque element. I enjoyed the different timelines as well, and seeing how that all interweaved together. So I would definitely recommend this if you feel like you can read a war book, because I know that some of us definitely felt as though we got burnt out on like World War One, World War Two. Maybe it's how it's always taught in schools, and then we sort of are, there's a lot of exposure to that media, but I hadn't read anything in that time frame for quite a while, so I was like, okay, we can do this. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it, and it lived up to my expectations for it. I went in with quite high expectations after really enjoying Bear and the Nightingale, and this is definitely different. It is definitely very, very different to that. It does not, like, it's not at all like similar to that, and I think I do still prefer, oh, it's a bit noisy out there, I do still prefer the Bear and the Nightingale trilogy, and I think I have more of a connection to those characters. But I did definitely enjoy this, and I will pick up other adult books that Catherine Arden puts out. And continuing with the new books, I read When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is like the new fantasy romance to read, the book of the year, the new dragon fantasy romance. So this is a start in I think it's the Moonfall series. I don't know how many books are going to be in this, and it does definitely lean on like an expansive world and the world building, and it's quite a confusing like setup but with a romantic plot woven throughout it as well. This is quite a world building led book. I'd say that this world, there are dragons, and when dragons die, they go up into the sky and become these moons, and every now and again these moons can crash land back down to Earth. There is an elemental magic system, so some people are able to like communicate with wind, earth, water, fire, and they have those skills. We are sort of at the beginning of the book just thrown into things. It feels as though you're in the middle of the story. You just get thrown in and you're like, okay, I'll just try and piece it together as we go along. And it does slowly like all come together. Our main character is called Rave, and she works for this like agent of rebellion in this world. That there are like 3 different kings, and this rebellion is trying to rebel against them and save children and save the populace. And so she does tasks for them, assassinating people that get in their way, trying to propel their vision for the world. So that's how we meet her, as she is tasked with assassinating this male. I feel like there are lots of questions within this book, like questions about who our main character is, where she comes from, the different like the world building, the setup. Like, it does create lots of questions in your mind as you're reading it. Some things I was definitely able to guess. I was like, why is it noisy outside? There were definitely things that I was able to guess, and we do get diary entries as well from a few years, I don't even know how many years, some time prior, and so you are trying to piece how everything is going to connect. I do like how the world is split with like areas that are really cold, areas that are really hot, and some dragons are better suited to different climates. So I think the strength in this is the world building. The romance, I wasn't obsessed with, actually. I wasn't obsessed with it. I do also think that this book was a little bit long, that I was obsessed in the beginning. I was like, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm sort of low-key obsessed. And I enjoyed the ending as well, but I do think the middle could have been tightened up a little bit. There was a point where I was like, I feel as though I've been reading this for quite a while. I read the first 200 pages quite quickly. I read the last 100 pages quite quickly, but the middle did drag a little bit for me. Not that I didn't enjoy it, I did still definitely enjoy it, but it felt a little long. It did feel a bit long, which is what brings this book slightly down, because in the beginning I was like, this is going to be 5 stars, and then I was like, actually maybe not. But it was definitely really enjoyable. I had fun with it. I would recommend it, especially if you enjoy more of a fantasy centric fantasy romance, that there is definitely a romance there that you are piecing together, sort of like this attraction between these two people, but it is quite fantastical, and I did like the writing style. I think some people say it's quite lyrical. I didn't necessarily notice that it was overly lyrical. I was reading it. It was just a writing style that I enjoyed. I found it quite easy enough to read, but that's how other people describe it. So that's sort of like a lyrical writing style. But then I know that I do enjoy more lyrical books because, I don't know, like Emma Morgenstern, that's more of a lyrical writing style, and I don't think it was quite as lyrical as that. So I don't know. It's what, I guess it depends what people read as well. Like, I come into reading this from more of a fantastical perspective, whereas you will get people that read more romance that are reading a fantasy romance, so I guess it depends what you're used to as well. But overall, I really enjoyed this and will definitely be continuing on with the series when it comes out, although this says that's not going to be until autumn 2025, so I've got quite a wait. And then my favourite book of the month was The Helm of Midnight by Marina Losetta. This is the first book in the 5 Penalties series. I think it's a trilogy with the third book coming out next year. This one, we are set in a fantastical world where once you die, your memories or your skills can be put into these like helmets that people can wear. So then if you're a doctor, people are able to take that knowledge that you had and are able to like treat people with your knowledge. However, sometimes those helmets can try and take control of the human as they want to try and live out their lives. And someone has done this with a serial killer. So they, after the serial killer's death, they have put their memories and life into a helmet, which has been kept under guard and very closely guarded to stop anybody using it. But this has recently, at the very beginning of the book, been stolen, and someone is now wearing this helmet, and these deaths, the gruesome murders are happening again. And so we're following our main character, who is investigating what is going on here, as she was there at the scene of the crime when it was stolen and trying to figure out what's happened. And then there are also 2 other perspectives that we follow, and we follow these in different timelines. So one of them is like 10 years prior to the events and one of them is 2 years prior to the events, but it does all like come together towards the end. I think the magic system in this is so interesting, and I think the world as well, like you know reading this that you're just getting a small like portion of like the history and the world, and there's going to be so much more going on. There's so much more to it that we're not exposed to in this, but I think we will get it in future books. So I did overall find like the case interesting, because this is like a mystery case within a fantastical world, and I know that can be quite like, I don't know, polarizing for people if they enjoy it. I typically would say I enjoy it, but I did enjoy that. But I'd say it was like the world building in and of itself and the magic that was the most interesting for me. Although I did really like the characters. Like, all the characters in this were so interesting, and I think so well fleshed out that I liked all our characters. Every perspective I enjoyed the lot. The side characters, they were done well as well. Like, I enjoyed all of them. I think it did such a good job of fleshing everybody out. Like, the characters were fleshed out, the world building was fleshed out, I liked the plot. It just did everything well. It just did everything so well. So I would definitely recommend this. I'm excited to continue with this series. And this is my highlight. This is like the highlight of the month. And this is not a new book. This is not a new 2024 release that I've recently picked up, unlike pretty much everything else here that I read. This has been sitting. This has been sat on my TBR for ages. And I finally read it and I loved it. I loved this. So I would highly recommend this one if it intrigues you. Highlight of the month. And then, not quite fitting into this worst to best list, but a book that I've started and will be probably finishing in the month of July, but I am in the process of reading, is Raybearer by Jordan Ifweko. I am 130 pages in. I was self-filming this, and I don't think I will finish this in June, as I have the rest of this afternoon, which isn't very much now, because instead of filming this at 10 AM I'm filming this at 5 PM. Oh yeah, because it was too noisy. It was too noisy this morning. It was ridiculous. So I don't have much left for today. I then have tomorrow, so I do not think this will be finished in June, but I think it could be finished at the very beginning of July. It's been very easy to read these first 130 pages. I think I will whiz through it. This is a YA fantasy duology. We're following a character, Tarisay, and she's been raised apart from everyone by her like mysterious mother, and then as the book goes on, she gets like introduced into society and into the court of the crown prince, but just before she goes there, her mother commands her to kill him, and she is obliged to fulfill that command, and so she's going in with this desire of, I do not want to kill this person, but I am obliged to. I cannot get out of this. I'm enjoying it so far, although I don't feel like I'm obsessed with it, but I will, I guess, wrap this up in my July wrap up. So there we go, those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. So I'd say it was a pretty good month. It was a good month in terms of quality, quantity, reading some of my TBR. Let me know what you read in the month of June, and if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on any of them, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!